Jurassic World had a huge problem long before the Indominus Rex escaped. People were getting used to these miracles. A living triceratops, a tyrannosaurus feeding show, and a lagoon with something enormous living beneath the surface. At first, these things would have been impossible to look away from. But after years of tickets, hotels, the gift shops, even dinosaurs became part of the routine. And this is when the park started chasing something far more dangerous. A new attraction, a bigger reveal. An animal no one had ever seen before. And somewhere inside the pressure, the Indominus Rex was created. The public were told it was the next evolution of Jurassic World, a new predator, a new reason to come back, a creature designed to put people in the seats again. But when you start looking at the Indominus closely, it starts to feel less like a one-off mistake and more like the first version of a much larger idea. Much larger. The size, intelligence, aggression, even the camouflaging ability. A predator built from a list of features. A creature designed to shock an audience that had already seen something so magnificent in the dinosaurs. I mean, how could you top that? And once Jurassic World proved that kind of animal could be made, the next question becomes pretty uncomfortable here. How much bigger were they willing to go? Because the Indominus Rex may only be part of the story we were allowed to see. You see, behind the public paddocks, behind the guest map, Jurassic World was building something far more dangerous than the theme park. It had the science, money, restricted section, even the military interest. And sitting in the middle of the park in plain sight was proof that Masrani Global could already control something on a scale that barely felt like an exhibit anymore. The Mosasaurus Lagoon. Thousands of guests sat above that water every single day, cheering as an animal the size of a building launched itself from the depths. They saw the show, but Masrani Global saw something else. This was proof of concept of a huge, large-scale containment model, and even a public test at scale. A way to keep something enormous hidden beneath the surface until the exact moment they wanted people to see it. So today, we're following the pattern Jurassic World had left behind. You see, there may have been a project that the park could never reveal to the public. A creature too large for a normal paddock, too unstable for guest attraction, and something far too valuable to destroy. That kind of animal would force Jurassic World to stop thinking like a zoo and start thinking like a kaiju facility. I know that word sounds crazy when you pair it with Jurassic World, but hear me out. This is the hidden kaiju project of Jurassic World. To understand how the park had reached that point, you have to start with the business model. Jurassic World was built on wonder. And I know that sounds harmless, but wonder is the most dangerous product in a company's arsenal. The first time someone sees a dinosaur, they never forget it. Hell, you guys know that. The problem comes after the 10th time, the 11th time, the 15th time. Jurassic World was dealing with an audience that were getting bored of dinosaurs. So the park had to create a new version of something to draw the guests in. That's where they drew up the Indominus Rex. The Indominus was the answer to a very corporate problem. How do you make people afraid of dinosaurs again? So the animal was built to feel unnatural, smarter, scarier, more teeth. The first hybrid gets people's attention. The second has to go even further than the first. And Jurassic World had already shown that it was willing to go further than anyone expected. The Mosasaurus was proof they could contain a large aquatic animal. And this is how the kaiju project started. They didn't begin with someone actually saying the word kaiju. They began with a small extension of things that already worked. You know, the large enclosures, the genetic splicing, and they ended up with something on a completely different island. Because if you're going for something of that scale, you're not going to build it underneath your park or even in the park. No, that type of thing would have to be kept secret. You see, Dr. Wu was not simply bringing back extinct animals anymore. He learned how to redesign them entirely. The animals are no longer limited by what once existed. They can become whatever the company wants, and they can become something someone else is willing to buy. Vic Hoskins did not look at the raptors and see a family attraction. He saw battlefield potential. Animals which would track, hunt, obey, an asset. A military asset to dominate an environment. Now we have a company willing to create for a buyer, and a lagoon proving that giant containment can work. All of this combination points to one direction: scale. And if you had an animal so large, it'd be very difficult to display in a public park. But it'd be extremely valuable in a restricted program, especially if the animal was aquatic or semi-aquatic. And then the ocean solves the biggest problem a project like this would face: visibility. On land, a giant creature is almost impossible to hide. Look at Godzilla. But underwater, scale disappears. And not only that, containment can be built around the depths. Gates, pressure doors, you get the picture. And if something goes wrong, there are far fewer witnesses. No tourists, no hotel balconies, nothing. That is why the Kaiju project would almost certainly move away from the center of the park. And it did. It moved to Site C. And this is where things start to get extremely interesting here. A place where failure could simply be explained as an accident, a marine breach or a breach in containment, a storm came along, and it was never reported. And to keep this project hidden, they're not going to name it something like the Kaiju Project. They need a label which would sound safe enough for a boardroom. But by then, the company had already created an animal far too dangerous for its handlers. And after Jurassic World fell, Mosasaurus Global had every reason to keep that quiet. The company could explain the Indominus, blame it as a one-time attraction hybrid, terrible decision, terrible containment failure. But something along the lines and the size of a kaiju, how the hell would you explain that? I mean, how would you explain that to the government? This is where Site C actually comes into play. You see, on this island, they'd already made a mini kaiju of sorts, the TREX. The size of this monster, because it was no dinosaur, it was absolutely huge, a kaiju in itself, and they kept the thing alive. The TREX had proved that the idea had gone much further than a hybrid project. Now, I know you might be thinking that the TREX was the first hybrid, the prototype hybrid. That is incorrect. They'd already started creating the Scorpius Rex before the TREX. This was something else. This was a proof of concept. Not to mention the size of some of these animals on the island. We have the Titanosaur, which is absolutely massive. That could be considered a kaiju in itself. And let's not forget the one thing which brings all this together, the proof that Jurassic World was indeed creating kaiju level assets. Let's bring in the idea of the gargantuan Spinosaurus. You see, in a concept image for Jurassic World Rebirth, we see the gargantuan Spinosaurus. It's absolutely massive. A kaiju-level Spinosaurus. But if Jurassic World was ever going to build something close to this, it would probably not begin with a completely new creature just like that. It would start with something smaller. Proof of concept, right? That's exactly what all this was about. All the other assets were proof to build up to this point. The TREX, the Indominus Rex, the military interest, the Site C, all of this pointed towards these kaiju level assets. Jurassic World was indeed scaling up and gearing towards this. Why? Well, it's obvious. They wanted that military interest, the next big thing. They were never going to fit a kaiju-level monster in one of their parks. This was for the military. Jurassic World wouldn't have randomly decided to build this giant monster. The company would have pushed eventually further and further until one of them crossed into this line, and they obviously did. The TREX was bad enough, but this thing out in the ocean is so secret that barely anyone knows about it. That is until you've watched this video today. A creature Jurassic World grew, modified, hid, and then eventually, like always, lost control. Because life will not be contained. It breaks through barriers, and life will find a way. This kaiju project was not cancelled, nor was it ever found. It was not exposed or destroyed. It just simply disappeared from any version of the public story. Or was it actually picked up on the sonar? At one point, we see an asset which the crew were tracking. Could the second asset which appeared on the screen actually have been this gargantuan Spinosaurus? But what do you think? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And if you watched it this far, hit that like button, please. It really does help me out. And subscribe for more content like this coming up in the future. You won't want to miss it. Believe you me. Massive thanks to the InGen research team who are on screen now. You guys keep the power on in the park. And if you came across a kaiju level monster in Jurassic World, could you take her any worse? You bet Jurassic can. Catch you later.